Have you ever felt like getting herpes was entirely your fault? Like it was this punishment for something, or it was this lesson you're supposed to learn for a wrong you committed? Because if that sounds like you, you're no different than my most recent coaching client. She's had herpes for 25 years, and she carried this like a dark cloud, like a punishment, like something that can only hold her back. And in this video, I want to explain the 3 reasons why herpes isn't your fault, whether those 3 reasons are actually valid, and how to actually detach from these reasons so that you can move forward and just see herpes as a neutral thing. I first want to start off with who I am. So if you haven't watched this channel before, my name is Christopher. I've helped people, coached them through their diagnosis to rid shame, make disclosure effortless, attract a loving partner, whether you've had herpes for 5 years, 5 minutes, or 5 months. Doesn't matter. No one is hopeless. No one is helpless. And the first thing I do with my coaching clients, and the first reason why herpes isn't your fault, is because we've been fundamentally misinformed and basically taught a stigma. Now, I know it's insane to say, but more people on planet Earth have HSV1 or HSV2 than do not. They're both herpes, in my opinion. The H stands for herpes, HSV1, HSV2. And we've basically been taught that the largest amount of herpes, HSV1, isn't actually herpes, it's just a cold sore. First issue. The second issue is that there is such a taboo around STIs and STDs and anything related to your genitals. So oftentimes people will struggle when they get diagnosed with genital herpes, or when they find out that their cold sore is herpes. So we've sort of been taught that if you get herpes, it means this. It means you're disgusting and you're gross and you slept around and you made a mistake. And this sort of learned secrecy from the part of those diagnosed and the learned ignorance keeps this whole herpes stigma alive. And it's sad because the people who are diagnosed with herpes, they can easily speak up and they can easily come out and they can easily all rise up. Are you watching this right now and say, like, this is a bunch of nonsense. I'm not going to let the herpes stigma dictate me anymore. I'm not going to live in shame. And sometimes I think I'm delusional for stepping up and speaking out. But I want to make it clear that the first reason why herpes isn't your fault is because we've all been programmed and brainwashed to believe a certain stigma about your diagnosis. And what I know for a fact is that we're not going to get rid of the herpes stigma. We're not going to dismantle it or destroy it. I don't think it's ever going away. But what I want to instill in you and in my coaching clients and in everyone is that you're in control of how you feel about yourself. And you can shift your own mindset, detach from the herpes stigma, and stop ascribing a meaning onto your diagnosis, especially a meaning that is negative. So really look at yourself and say, well, what does it mean for me to have herpes? What is the herpes stigma all about? Is it about how I lived my life? Is it about sex? Did I perform a shameful act? Do I deserve whatever society is saying to me? Because oftentimes we are so hard on ourselves. We're like, okay, I have herpes now, so it means all of these negative things. And there is a conscious effort that's required to take a look at yourself and detach, because we are so programmed to look at the negatives and be hard on ourselves. And nowadays, if you try to be confident and you try to make the most of your life, you'll actually get shut down. A lot of people out there don't want others to be confident and critically think and make the most of their circumstances. So we live in this echo chamber of like miserableness, if that's even a word. And even on the herpes Reddits and the herpes support groups, I'm in some of them and I see so much negativity in there, and I almost like don't even want to put myself in there because I oftentimes feel that those people are stuck. Now this is sort of turning into a long-winded rant, and I apologize, but the first reason is that there is a stigma around herpes that is continuing to be reinforced, that is based on the fact that society shames sex while pursuing sex, while shoving it down our throats with OnlyFans models and TV and nudity and all of this stuff. And when you realize that the stigma is mostly based around misinformation, ignorance, sexual shame, in a world where those things are also quite apparent, you can sort of realize it's a bunch of nonsense. The second reason, going into this now, why herpes isn't your fault kind of leads off of the first point. Because we think that risking herpes is something that you should have avoided and you could have avoided. And if you just had a different lifestyle and you weren't such a slut, then you wouldn't have herpes. And the second reason why it isn't your fault is because the risk of herpes is inevitable. But that inevitability is something nobody really thinks about or even knows about. The reason I say this is because HSV1 and HSV2 could be asymptomatic or causing very little symptoms in a large amount of the population. Okay, so we have that. We then have a lack of testing on STI panels, or basically an omittance of testing on STI panels unless you actively ask or there's a reason to get screened or tested. So you have the mild to no symptoms, lack of testing. You then have lack of knowledge of lack of testing. Okay, and then you have the small population, or however big the population is, of symptomatic worst case scenario infections, symptoms, manifestations of HSV1 or 2. And those people paint the image for what herpes is. We then have a bunch of misinformation around, can you pass it without an outbreak? Well, yes, you can. A bunch of people out there who don't disclose because they don't think oral herpes is herpes. A bunch of misinformation about genital HSV1 coming from oral HSV1. So we have a whole bunch of misinformation and lack of proper testing and worst case scenarios being, I guess, the big picture. And then you have everybody dating out there when herpes is a skin-to-skin virus. Nobody seems to ask, nobody seems to care, nobody seems to know that they should figure out if their partner has herpes. So to go back in time and make this applicable for you, you didn't know that your partner has herpes. You didn't know if they knew they had herpes. It could have been your first partner, it could have been your 100th partner, that doesn't matter. The risk of herpes is likely inevitable because human beings are having skin-to-skin contact with each other. Now, no one's going to bat an eye if your grandma gives you a cold sore. It's not a big deal. That's not herpes. But as soon as you contract herpes sexually, which goes back into reason number one, you apparently should feel ashamed and like it's a mistake and all of these things. And these three reasons go hand in hand because it's like there's a bullshit stigma for a inevitable risk of a virus that is arguably more common than it is not. And we have such a fear from reason number one, the stigma, that nobody wants to get educated about herpes if they don't have it. And anybody who has herpes is so ashamed to speak out about it or even learn to detach from that original stigma. Which leads into number three, which is that biology doesn't care about morality. Okay? What I mean by this, and I like to make jokes about this, imagine HSV1 and HSV2, and they can talk to each other, and they're having a little meeting being like, have you seen what the human beings have done with us? They think that you, HSV1, isn't herpes, and like, they also think that HSV2, it means you're like a terrible person. Like, we don't even care how we're passed. We're just going from human to human to human to human. And that's the thing. It's like these viruses are millions of years old. They can cause symptoms. They can not cause symptoms. They could transmit easily. They could be not transmitted easily depending on the circumstances of a relationship. And they simply don't care. And they're probably making fun of us right now because we've made such a huge deal about HSV. There's viruses out there that'll kill you in like 2 days or 2 hours. HSV1 and HSV2 what are they going to do? Cause a couple symptoms a couple times a year and then gradually decrease over time? Herpes is a mental health disorder. And the reason why herpes isn't your fault is because biology was never concerned about the amount of partners you had, whether you cheated on your partner, whether you were lied to, whether you're black or white or female or anything. The viruses just want to survive from human to human to human to human to human. And then somewhere out there, us human beings, as silly as we are, invented a stigma, misinformed us, didn't educate us properly, didn't test us properly, and arguably didn't care enough about herpes to make it a big deal until they could find a way to shame people and make it a big deal. So the reason why it's so important to detach from these three reasons, because they aren't valid. Stigma is nonsense and based around sex in a world where we all pursue sex. We're fundamentally misinformed and uneducated about herpes and the inevitable risk that exists whenever we're having human contact with each other, and that the biology doesn't care about morality. It just wants to go from person to person to person, whether it's sexual or non-sexual. You can start to realize that your herpes diagnosis is simply a neutral thing that happened to you. Some of us get it sexually. Some of us get it non-sexually. Some of us are in the weird genital HSV1 category where your partner got it non-sexually, but then they passed it to you sexually. The virus doesn't care. It's skin-to-skin contact, and then human beings decide, based on how you got it, whether you should be normal or ashamed. And it is going to take some conscious effort to reverse these beliefs. Remind yourself of the things I'm telling you in each video. Because in terms of how I processed my diagnosis, it probably was becoming a herpes advocate. I can't even speak English. Becoming a herpes advocate and reinforcing all of these things to you that helps reinforce them to me. And the more that you step into the version of yourself that no longer looks at your diagnosis as a shameful, disgusting, mistake that you are worthy of being punished for, the more you're going to move on with your life. Because the coaching process I go through with my clients is detaching from the stigma, getting educated about prevalency and lack of testing, building back your confidence and reframing your mindset so that it's no longer this punishment, this thing you should feel guilty for, this mistake you made. It's simply just something that happened to you. And when you have that energy, when you move into step number 3, which is disclosure and dating, you don't come from the perspective of like, so I have this punishment that I was given, and I hope you don't look at me differently. And basically your energy is going to reject your partner before your diagnosis is even the reason they reject you. Now, if you do want some help with your diagnosis, reframing your mindset, getting educated properly about herpes and making disclosure effortless, I'm going to leave that 3-step process video in the description box and also a link to book a call with me. So to summarize this video again, the 3 reasons why herpes isn't your fault is because the stigma is entirely fabricated. The risk of herpes is inevitable. People just don't realize it's inevitable. And the virus itself doesn't care about morality. It just cares about going from person to person to person to person. When you reframe those mindsets, when you ingrain them in your head every day, you slowly start to shift from all of the reasons why herpes is going to hold you back to all of the reasons why it doesn't have to. And then later, all the reasons why herpes is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. I know it sounds crazy. If you want some extra help, check the description box, and I'll see you guys in the next video.